Good afternoon. Welcome to today's Scrutiny Board meeting for the Adults Health and Active Lifestyles. My name is Andrew Scopes. I'm a councillor for the Beeston Holbeck Ward and I'm the new chair of this meeting. If you're looking for Councillor Abigail Marshall-Tongue, you need to wait about a week and a half till her Scrutiny Board is on. I'm sure it'll be on YouTube as well. Just for everyone's knowledge, this is a public meeting. It's also streamed live on YouTube. So welcome to everyone watching online. You can easily find the papers that we have in front of us on the council's website or put into a good search engine and it'll come up pretty quickly. I'm going to start with some introductions if that's okay. So as I said, I'm Andrew Scopes. I'm the new chair of this board. I'm really excited to be here. We're going to go around this way. Can you introduce yourself? And then we'll get on. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Toby Russell, Clerk to the Board.
Good afternoon, I'm John Beale. I chair Healthwatch Leeds and have been nominated by Healthwatch as a co-opted member of this board.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Councillor Eileen Taylor and I represent Chapel Allerton Ward.
Good afternoon, I'm Councillor Mahalia France-Mere and I represent Moortown Ward.
Good afternoon, Councillor James Gibson and I represent Crossgates and Winmore Ward.
Luke Farley, Labour Councillor for Bermsot and Richmond Hill.
Mohammed Iqbal, Councillor for Hunslet and Riverside Ward.
Good afternoon, Councillor Kevin Ritchie, Bramley and Stanley Ward.
Hi everyone, I'm Councillor Fiona Venner. I'm the Executive Board Member for, I have to remember my new title, for Children's Social Care and Health Partnerships. Thank you.
Good afternoon everybody, my name is Councillor Salma Arif and I'm the Executive Member for Adult Social Care, Public Health and Active Lifestyles. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm Victoria Eaton, Director of Public Health at Leeds City Council.
Hi, it's Tony Cook, Chief Officer, Health Partnerships.
Good afternoon, I'm Stephen Baker, I'm the Head of Active Leeds.
Good afternoon, I'm Caroline Barrier, I'm the Interim Director for Adults and Health.
Hello, I'm Sam Prince, I'm Director of Operations at Leeds Community Healthcare.
Hello everyone, my name is Tim Riley. I'm the West Yorkshire Integrated Care Board Accountable Officer for Leeds.
I'm Councillor Winkage, representing Morley South.
Councillor Conrad Hartbrook, representing Rothwell, and I'd like to welcome Andrew to the board.
Councillor Barry Anderson, Adlan Warfield Ward, and substituting for Councillor Firth today.
Hello everyone, I'm Councillor Caroline Anderson. I represent Adlan Wharfdale Ward.
Good afternoon, I'm Angela Brogden, the Principal Scrutiny Advisor.
Thank you, Toby, for the first few formal items. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Under agenda item number 1, there are no appeals against the refusal of inspection of documents. Under agenda item number 2, there are no items which would exclude the press or the public. Under item number 3, there are no formal late items. However, there has been supplementary information submitted in relation to item number 11, innovation in the health and care sector. And under agenda item number 4, can I ask members to declare any interests? Thank you. And under agenda item 5, we've received apologies from Councillor Firth with Councillor Barry Anderson substituting. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to move on to item 6, minutes of the last meeting. I wasn't there, but those who were there, are you happy with the minutes? Okay, Angela, is there anything in the minutes you want to bring up at this point?
There's no particular matters arising. I guess it's under the work schedule, so that'll be picked up as part of today's agenda anyway, Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to move on to agenda item 7. So this is around co-opted member. As we know, previously it's been Dr. John Beale from Leeds Watch, and Leeds Watch have again nominated Dr. John Beale. Are we content as a board to accept him as a co-opted member? Okay, so those who can't see the screen, everyone's nodding, so I'll announce that as successful. Welcome back to the board, John. We appreciate your experience. Okay, so I'm going to move on to agenda item 8, which is on page 21 of the packs. So this is the terms of reference of the Scrutiny Board. I don't think, has anyone got any comments? Hopefully you've read the paper, but I don't think there's anything that's going to surprise anyone. And also the full council sets the terms of reference, so I think we accept them. Okay, any comments from any members on that? No. Okay, I'm going to move on to agenda item 9, which is on page 39. So you see recommendations right at the start. So the first one is to re-establish the Health Service Developments Working Group, which just means that we can have working groups and talk about substantive items. I'm proposing that we re-establish it as per the terms of reference. Are members content to do that? I can see people nodding again. Okay, so we'll do that. So that's A. And then B, in terms of nominations for JOSC, which is the Joint Health Overview and Scrutiny Committee, which is a West Yorkshire-wide body. It's currently not a statutory body, but it does get consulted on things that affect all of West Yorkshire, and often they'll come here if they specifically affect us and we think it's relevant. So in previous years, we've had the chair and then one opposition councillor in that. So I'm proposing myself and Councillor Caroline Anderson. Are members content with that? Again, people are nodding, so I'll take that as done. Are there any other comments on item 9? No, great, thank you. Okay, I'm going to move on to, I haven't missed anything there yet. Good. Okay, item 10, which is page 53 of your packs. So this is the sources of work item. And so each year we have a conversation at the start of the year about what we want to talk about. And there's a number of sources of work that we will look at. So obviously, work that's been carried forward from last year, definitely look at that. We'll talk about events and things that are coming up. And so that's also really important. But we've also got a really good set of guests today. And so what I'm going to ask I'm going to ask a number of people to just give an overview of their role and any areas that they want us to look at. I'm just going to be quite strict on time, so I'm going to give each person 5 minutes to talk through what they want to. And then once we've done that, I'll open it to members for questions. And the idea is we'll get a broad range of ideas in terms of what work we want to look at. And then we'll start populating the work schedule, if that's okay. So with that, can I start by inviting Councillor Venner to speak? Thank you.
Thank you. So where this Scrutiny Board overlaps with my work, it's the health partnerships bit of my job title. Children's social care is obviously with children's scrutiny. So I'm here in my role as chairing the Health and Wellbeing Board and politically leading the council's interface with the NHS. So this board has always had regular updates from Tim in terms of the development of the new structures of the NHS, and I think that will be really helpful to continue that in terms of, I think it's quarterly you've been visiting this board. I would recommend that continues. In terms of what issues come up the most from the public, this won't be a surprise to anyone, but the issues we probably hear about the most and talk about the most in the Health and Wellbeing Board are access to primary care and access to dentistry. We had a scrutiny inquiry last year about access to dentistry, which included some really harrowing testimony from someone who came to the board with lived experience. And there were people here from the dental school and from various parts of the system around dentistry. I think it would be really useful to revisit that, particularly with the change of commissioning in dentistry, with it becoming commissioned by the ICS at a regional level. My other 2 suggestions would be around, I think one of the things we're really proud about on the Health and Wellbeing Board is that we have the voices of people who are in receipt of health and care services, very central. So we hear from people with lived experience at every single meeting. And we've done things like the Big Leeds chat, and we have the People's Voice network. I don't think that's quite their title, actually. I can't remember what it's, something People's Voice something. So I think having I think that's a potential inquiry, actually, is how people's voices are heard within the health and care system. or if not an inquiry, I think it would at least be interesting for you to get an overview of all the different ways that we get direct feedback from people who live in Leeds and engage with health and care services. And my final suggestion, this is a piece of work I'm really proud of. I think it would be really positive for you to hear from the allyship programme. So this is a programme that's led by the Health and Wellbeing Board, where every member of the board, and bearing in mind it's really senior people, it's like, you know, Caroline's there as the DAS, Tim's there as the accountable person for Leeds, the chief execs of all the trusts attend. Each member of the board is paired with a third sector organisation that works specifically in the area of health inequalities. And this came out of a presentation by the Solidarity Network, and that is a group of charities that work with the most marginalised people in Leeds. So it's Gate, who work with gypsy and travellers, Basis, who work with sex workers, Lassen, who work with refugees and asylum seekers, and Mesmac, who work with the LGBTQ community. And they presented at Health and Wellbeing Board a couple of years ago on the basis that if we can get health outcomes right for the people that are the most marginalised, we'll get them right for everybody. And I'm paired with Gate as part of the allyship programme, which has been an absolute privilege to be able to work directly with gypsy and traveller community. And I think it'll be really positive for you to hear from some of the allies. I know Councillor Arif's been working with Crossgate Good Neighbours. It is Crossgate Good Neighbours, isn't it? And they've launched a campaign around bus fares for older people with the mayor. So we've been able to. The idea is that the members of the Health and Wellbeing Board are people who are in positions of power and influence and can provide advocacy and championship for the organisations that they're working with. So we've been able to do some really fantastic work. So I think that'll be a really positive item to hear from the allyship programme. So those would be my suggestions, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Venner. Councillor Salma Arif.
Thank you, Chair. Just to echo Councillor Venner's point about the allyship, I think that's really important work, and I've certainly found it quite useful being part of the allyship. A couple of suggestions from me, if I may. Some people may or may not be aware. Yesterday, we launched to become a Marmot city. We had Sir Michael Marmot visit us. I think that's a really important piece of work, particularly looking at health inequalities in the city and looking at the wide determinants, and that we're focusing on housing and best start. So I'd be really, really keen for that work to carry on and be scrutinised. In terms of active Leeds, we've discussed it before, but if you look at the statistics, in more of our deprived areas, access to our leisure facilities are not where they need to be, and looking at the barriers and what we can do to make sure that those activity levels are up, but also people access the leisure centres. Those are two of my suggestions, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor F. Okay, Victoria.
Thank you, Chair. So very much support the sources of information contained in the paper and the comments that have been made by Councillor Venner and Arif. I just a couple more to add, if I may. One of the statutory duties of the Director of Public Health is to produce and publish a annual report on the health of this city, and we had a pause in that annual reporting during the pandemic, which we've now got back on track, and we're about to take the first Director of Public Health report since 2018 to the Health and Wellbeing Board in July. So that will be an annual reporting process. What we normally do is pick a different theme every year to focus on. So that may be something of interest to the board. And then the only other one which feels helpful to think about is another one of our statutory duties is to have a health protection board for the city, which has local priorities across the system, with senior leaders across the system, really looking at how we protect our population from harms to health. So obviously that includes, planning for any future pandemics that may be forthcoming, but kind of some stuff that's hitting us now as well. So the board does produce a report every 2 years that goes to Health and Wellbeing Board. So that might be something that the Scrutiny Board wants to take an interest in as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Victoria. Okay, Steve, do you want to come in next, please?
Thank you, Chair. Just to add to kind of Councillor Reef's kind of comments around obviously the barriers to, but ultimately further than that, in terms of our physical activity ambition work that we kind of continued, that will continue as well on that front, and it'd be good to kind of bring back to scrutiny again in terms of all that work across our kind of two key priority areas around active people and active environments, and particularly in terms of active people, children, young people, and mental health side of things, as well as the physical side barriers and the likes as well. So, and then in terms of active environments, especially around active travel and that kind of work that we're kind of doing in that sphere, in terms of the DFT kind of pilot project that we've got going in Bermondsey, Hare Hills, in Richmond Hill area. And as well in terms of active workplaces that we're doing a lot of work in at this current time, working with key organisations across Leeds to increase activity levels within the kind of business areas and organisations that we're kind of driving into as well. So that's a kind of key bit of work that we kind of continue to do. The other areas around health programmes and how we kind of utilise our skills in terms of physical activity to help, obviously from a primary kind of and secondary kind of care point of view, in terms of preventative measures that we can use in terms of trying to reduce some of the elements in terms of cancer work that we kind of do in our falls prevention kind of work, and our MSK kind of work that we're kind of doing as well on that front, just to kind of get an emphasis of how important that is as part of that preventative kind of measures in terms of the health and population that we're kind of going forward. So that's probably two key areas for us. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Steve. Okay, Caroline.
Thank you very much. So from our perspective around adults and health, we've got a couple of really large scale programs of work, transformation programs of work underway alongside our partners as well. So we've got what is called the Community Health and Wellbeing Programme, and that is really changing a way in which we deliver domiciliary care home care services. It's working with our external market of providers, and what we want to do is completely change the way in which that service is delivered, with an absolute focus around wellbeing for our citizens, to ensure that they are helped to remain living independently at home. The work involves LCH, Leeds Community Health, as our partners, and also our third sector as well. So that's one area. Another, and I'm sure my NHS colleagues will mention as well, that we've got a large scale intermediate care redesign programme underway, and we're working with Newton Europe on an implementation of a new design to improve outcomes for people who go into hospital, making sure to get them out of hospital as quickly as possible and back home with improved outcomes, rather than experiencing all sorts of delays. So a system-wide programme. And then the only other that I would mention is that work that we know we've got to do more around support of our unpaid carers, and really recognising the value that they bring, and making sure that our offer and our support to unpaid carers really increases as much as possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Interestingly, we're talking about the importance of carers just in the pre-meet as well, because of that sort of real fundamental shift there. Okay, thank you. Okay, Sam, do you want to come in next, please? Your speaker isn't on, Sam. Sorry, thank you.
Three areas that I think you may be interested in. So the first one's around system flow, and picking up from where Caroline left off around the Home First programme, but also the requirement for community services to respond within 2 hours to people who are in crisis at home, rather than going into hospital. As part of that as well, looking at active recovery and the interface between the NHS intermediate care service and reablement, and how we work together. Second area is around the cost of living situation and what that means in terms of access for patients being able to actually get to appointments, and how we could do that differently. And I suppose attached to that would be our general financial environment around expecting more for less, and what that will mean in terms of how we need to deliver services in a different way and how that may impact particularly, and we don't want to increase health inequality. And then the third area, which may be for this board or for the children and young people, is around child and adolescent mental health services in its totality, but particularly picking up neurodiversity and access to assessment for autism and other neurodevelopmental conditions.
Thank you very much, Sam. Okay, Tim.
Thank you. One of the advantages of going at this end of the list is nearly everything I was going to say has been said. I suppose I just want to perhaps focus on a couple of those things. One, I think there is a real issue around health inequalities, the Marmot agenda, poverty, and particularly from an NHS, how the NHS is engaging within within that agenda and with that agenda. So I think that may be something that, as part of those wider discussions, colleagues would really like to take a look at. A couple of other areas, yes, I've absolutely, I think general practice and dental access, I would expect you to want to look at those. One of the things around the how these will be managed by the ICB is general practice will continue to have a very Leeds level focus to the support we give to GP practices. Dental access is most likely, and dental services are most likely to be managed at a West Yorkshire level. So I think there's a link here with the JOSC that you might want to check. And see how we work that. I'm fairly certain every part of West Yorkshire will want to look at this issue in one way or another. And obviously with general practice, one of the things is a huge number of people visit their GP every month, somewhere between a quarter and a third of the population equivalent. And therefore the numbers that you hear and see coming through to you are perhaps sometimes reflective of that. I think that's a very different position from the dental position, which is the absolute sparsity of access for the majority of people. So there's a couple of slightly different nuances there. And then, as already been mentioned, I'm working on with partners across West Yorkshire we're just coming up to our first anniversary rated care board at West Yorkshire level. One of the things we wanted to do is to make sure that we've reviewed our operating model and really understand what's working, what's not working, what needs to improve. And also importantly, make sure that we're strengthening and delivering for and with the places that make up the West Yorkshire Partnership. So that work's underway. I'm leading that on behalf of West Yorkshire. On top of that, we've also been given a 30% reduction in what we call running costs. So effectively the budget for the staff that work across West Yorkshire ICB. So we're really effectively doing those two pieces of work together. And as we go through the year, I think there'll be some really important, but not perhaps, I don't want to overstate it, but there'll be some changes that will have implications for Leeds. So I think that sort of perhaps autumn time would be a good time to have a look at what we're doing around that. Otherwise, I'd echo the things that have already been mentioned.
Thanks, Tim. Can I just, when we talked last week, you mentioned about children neurodiversity assessments. Can I just push you on that as well, please?
Yeah, I think I'm with Sam here that either this group or Children's Scrutiny would want to look at that. There are some significant challenges around access for children and young people to mental health and neurodiversity services, particularly in terms of mental health. It's probably more access to services and treatment. In terms of neurodiversity, it's as much access to diagnosis. So those I would, yeah, absolutely. And, I think there's a conversation between yourselves and Children's exactly how we handle that. But yeah, very happy to, from a health service perspective, obviously here. So.
Thank you very much. And Phil, next, do you want to introduce yourself as well, please? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you, Chair. Hello, my name is Phil Wood. I'm the Chief Executive for Leeds Teaching Hospitals NHS Trust, although I've been in the Trust and the City for 22 years, so I'm very familiar with where we are. So thank you, Chair. If I can just go on, and again, much of what we're involved with has been mentioned. I would re-emphasise our focus on the Home First programme with city partners. That's a key part of our work for this year in terms of both improving patients' and citizens' experience in and out of hospital, but also because it allows us to then work on achieving access targets for patients with elective and emergency demand following the pandemic. So our key focus will be to improve our emergency care performance and work with city partners to provide an alternative offering to emergency care for patients who need urgent assessment. We've got work underway in the planning stage at Chapel Allerton and Wharfdale Hospital, which will be in development during the year to provide additional operating theatre capacity for those parts of the city, which will allow us to improve our backlog position. And we will continue to have a focus on our cancer performance, which continues to be a national challenge, although we are making good progress with that. Two other areas I should mention, I think, one is that we will be working again with city partners around reducing healthcare associated infections, which is a challenge in the city and certainly a challenge for us in Leeds teaching hospitals. We've got a commitment on staff retention, and that's around recognising, again, working with city partners in the One Workforce team around the city's pressure on allied and other health professionals. And we will be doing internal work to continue trying to improve our turnover rates. And during the year, although of course not for completion, but during the year, we'll be continuing now with the planning process for our new hospital announcement, having been allocated a funding envelope to work with the national team around developing a new women's and children's hospital for the centre of the city. Thank you.
Super, thank you very much. So the other person we would have liked to hear from is Sarah Munro. She's the CEO of the Leeds York NHS Trust, but I met with her last week, and one of the things she brought out, which I'm just saying now for the minutes and for the board's knowledge, was the community mental health transformations programme is something sort of continuing our work on that as well. So I think this is a good point to bring in members of the board. Is there any questions and or suggestions that any members want to bring in? I'll start with Councillor Caroline Anderson.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Sandy Lee mentioned something. I don't know if he's formally approached the children's scrutiny about looking into vaping and the effect that's having on children in these, I don't know what you call them, but whatever the children are being offered, buying or taken up illegally. And perhaps maybe we could do a joint thing with them. I mean, the remit of this board is massive. And so we need to choose things that are going to actually make a difference. And it's nice to hear about everything, but we're here to make a difference, aren't we? So let's choose something that we can do.
Yes, thank you. I've been in contact with Councillor Lay. We're going to organise a meeting with myself, Angela, the new chair of the Children's Board, and hopefully Victoria Eaton. Interestingly, I raised this with Victoria Eaton in the chair's brief around the smoking, so I'd asked her to bring some data on that. I don't know if you want to do that when we get to the paper, Victoria.
I'm more than happy. We have produced, in response to your questions, Councillor Scopes, but also we have been contacted by the Children's Scrutiny Board with an identical question. So we have produced sort of a briefing on the current position with rates in Leeds, and then what we're doing about it so far. So we're more than happy to send that round to members in full after the meeting, if that's helpful. And we have been approached to actually provide a report to the Children and Family Scrutiny Board on that particular issue. So that work's in progress.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I thought it's quite interesting because it's a piece I'd been interested in anyway, and then Councillor Lay wrote to me as well. So that's reinforcing it. My take is if the Children's Scrutiny are going to look at it in the first instance, let's see how they get on and see if there's anything that comes out of that they refer to us. But I'll certainly have a proper conversation with the chair and the two scrutiny advisors. Thanks for that. And if you, Victor, if you send that to Angela, and we'll circulate that around the whole board. Very happy to keep that conversation alive. Thank you. Okay, John Beale, please.
Thank you, Chair. One thing which I don't think has been specifically mentioned, mental health has been mentioned, but specifically crisis care. Health Watch is aware that there are still issues around crisis care for mental health, so that may be worth looking at. And the other thing mention was made about how people's voices are heard. I think that underlies many of the things that we've been listing. Actually listening to what the public, what the patients are saying, and not just listening to the professions and the managers. I think that's important, but we do need to hear what the people out there are experiencing.
Thank you, John. I think that's really interesting. I was talking to someone from Andy's Men's Club, which is men's mental health charity, and they were talking about how the suicide prevention funding has been cut very recently, and so that's a really important moment for crisis. Okay, I'm going to bring in Councillor Ritchie next, and I've seen you, Councillor Gibson.
Thanks, Chair, and everybody. It's going to be a busy year, I can see. It's my first year on this board. But I do want to throw something else in there, which may not be possible to cover, but I think it's something that needs to be on the forward agenda. And that's the proliferation of cannabis use. We never seem to talk about that, and it affects so many areas of life. But we don't really know, I don't think, exactly how it affects people directly in terms of mental health, children. I mean, now people are smoking it in the home. It's, you know, it's almost like, to me, it's a taboo subject. We've got a grip of smoking, numbers, stats, the effects and so on, big public health campaign, and made great progress. We've now introduced vaping, which I agree needs to be looked at. But cannabis has just proliferated in the last few years. Everywhere you go, people seem to be smoking cannabis. There was someone in Millennium Square yesterday morning smoking a joint. The impact it's having on people's housing, because it's so dense and it seems to seep through walls, is a big impact. So I think we need, maybe it's already out there, I don't know, but I've never heard how many figures people are using it. What impact is it having on families and our city and so on? So I think that's something that needs to be investigated, reported on and looked into.
Thanks for that, Councillor Ritchie. And I think there is a wider point also around the impact on young people in terms of the criminal child exploitation. And so that's one of my biggest concerns about the cannabis smoking in my area in Beeston, is the children end up drug running, and then that draws them into a life of crime that is not good for their whole well-being. I don't know if anyone from the NHS wants to comment on that initially, or Victoria. Super, thank you very much.
Board members may know that we do have a drug and alcohol board for the city, which I do chair, so we can certainly take that back to colleagues, and if there is interest in a report, bring something to this board.
Thanks, Victoria. I think what would be really, really helpful is if we get some initial information to Angela, circulate around the board, and then we can have a conversation, maybe have a conversation with Councillor Ritchie offline about whether it needs to be a formal item or not. But no, thank you very much for that. Okay, Councillor Gibson.
Thank you, Chair. I guess then John's suggestions. In my time on the panel, which has been 3 years, we've never actually looked at, as far as I can remember, tertiary mental health services, including tertiary mental health services for neurodiverse people and people with learning disabilities. So it's similar to what John had said, Dr. Beale had said, sorry, John. And I think it's something that we need to be looked at. Please, panel members, do correct me if I'm wrong. I can't remember that we have looked at that.
No, thanks for that, Councillor Gibson. And yeah, well, one of the things that's on my list is the waiting time for children in particular to get onto sort of mental health support. And if you're 13 and you have to wait 2 or 3 years, that's a lifetime. And so for us as older people, 2 years is less of a significant thing. It's still too long, but for a 13-year-old, it's impossible. So do you want to come back, James?
Yeah, I was thinking more about psychiatric intensive care units in particular.
Thank you very much. Okay, well, I guess what we're doing is we'll make a note of everything, and then we'll take it away. Is that all right? Good. No, that's good. Okay, I'm going to bring in Councillor Conrad.
Yeah, just in terms, I was going to bring this up as part of agenda item 12, but since we're looking for potential sources of work and things we might want to discuss, I was going through the statistics of where we're kind of, I won't say underperforming or overfix that can make, you know, a city like ours better or worse than for any one particular metric than any other area. But while there are some things like cardiovascular and cancer mortality where we're doing representatively better than the UK, and that's to be celebrated, I did pick up that suicide rates in Leeds are stubbornly higher. They're a third higher than the national average, and are clearly, you know, cost of living and the fact that we're in, you know, we've got large, we're a city ward. I'm sure there are many factors, but that picks up on some of the things that other members of this board have just mentioned around, you know, Councillor Gibson was saying around, you know, third sector and Andy's Health Club, and I think somebody mentioned that some of the funding for some of those support groups, and I think that as we know, there is a large sector of voluntary kind of mental health, and how us as a city coordinate and work to get best practice across the whole system, not just the bit that we directly control. I think will be quite interesting.
No, thank you for that. That's all very interesting. And Councillor Gibson, Angela's just highlighted, we are planning to look at some work on the mental health strategy in July. So I think there's definitely going to be space to dig down into that. But I think your specific point is really valid, and I don't know if we'll have time to get all the data for that specific area, but we'll do our best. Okay, in terms of, I can't see anyone else indicating at the moment, so just some of the other things that I'd sort of jotted down. So I think there's a piece of work which the predecessor board have been looking at around workforce challenges and the impacts on patients. I think that's something that we might want to look at. I think there's a piece around excess deaths in hospitals, which I think would be really interesting. But there's a piece of work around how we support and safeguard people on street-based lifestyles. And the other thing I thought would be a really interesting conversation, but probably quite a difficult one, is looking at how the funding model works. So obviously there's the partnership stuff is funded, a lot of it is funded by both council and NHS, and just looking at how we do that compared to others, I think would be an interesting conversation. Okay, I'm going to bring in Councillor Farley.
Okay, thank you, Chair, and welcome to Adults Health. Just to follow up on your initial point, I think looking at the workforce it is really important going forwards, and I think Professor Wood made reference to retention. I think one of the key issues with the NHS at the moment is we tend to look at kind of how do we recruit more people, but it's also how do we look at keeping the staff that we've got within the system. So I would like to see more information on efforts to recruit staff system-wide, but also how we're keeping those people within the system. If they're not particularly happy working in a certain area, you know, are we trying to keep them within the local NHS? I think one of the other key elements to workforce is around staff engagement, and again, we've a long time ago when I used to work for Leeds Teaching, there was a program called the Leeds Way, which is around the values of the organisation. now that piece of work is approaching, I believe, a decade old. So the question really for all of the NHS organisations is what are you doing to refresh or review the values of the organisation and keep staff on track with kind of what why you're there? What is it that makes you wake up in the morning and go into work? So yeah, I'd just leave that there, something to chew on.
Thanks, Councillor Foley. Quite interestingly, in my previous scrutiny chair on the strategy and resources, we spent a lot of time with the Leeds City Council HR team making sure they're doing exactly what you're talking about, which is the wider benefits. But I guess it's, if we're really honest, it's really difficult when there's a cost of living crisis and you see our unions balloting to strike action. It makes it very difficult that whatever the wider offer is, it's really difficult to get over the ultimate issue, which is, are you being paid enough to pay your bills? Okay, so are there any other comments, or any of our guests want to comment on anything the councillors have said? No, super, great. So what I think we'll do is we've got work item again, because it's always their final agenda item on scrutiny board meetings. But ultimately, I'll go away and sit down. I've scheduled in some time with Angela tomorrow, in fact, to go through some of this and start putting together a work programme, which we'll bring back next time, if that's okay with everyone. Okay, good. Okay, we're going to move on to item 11, which is hopefully be an interesting discussion. Hopefully people have seen the additional information I got sent round, which is hopefully just gives you a bit more context of the so what. So I'm going to invite Tony to give an introduction, and I think we've got someone extra at the table if you want to introduce yourself as well. What you can do is assume we've all read the papers, but if there's anything in particular you want to draw out, feel free. Thank you.
I'll start actually, Councillor Scopes, if that's okay. I'll just do a really brief introduction and then hand over to you for more detail. So this is a report about innovation in the health and social care system, and it particularly focuses on the work of the Leeds Academic Health Partnership, which is a really important collaborative organisation that very much capitalises on the fact that Leeds is both a big university city and has a teaching hospitals trust. So it's bringing together people from across the health and care partnership and looking at how we can develop really fantastic solutions to health challenges that people are facing. Councillor Arif and I visited the innovation pop-up recently that's referenced in the report, which I have to say was incredible. And what was really fascinating was seeing some of the innovations and the impact they'll have on people's lives. So just to give one example, we met someone from a Scandinavian company who've produced some sensors that people can use in their own home so that you can remotely be aware of when someone's moving about, and it's really around falls prevention and safety. And I was just thinking how much easier that is than trying to persuade someone to wear a pendant, which they never seem to be wearing when they actually fall over. Or I remember in my grandma's house, I was constantly calling for help by accidentally pulling the cord. So I think I think some of the innovations that are out there and ways that you can, monitor your own diabetes, you can remotely make sure someone's keeping hydrated and taking their blood pressure and managing their own health. A lot of the tech is really empowering, and also I'm saying this as someone who's very untechy, very accessible and user-friendly. So the report outlines the breadth of what the Leeds Academic Health Partnership is coordinating, and it also locates the work within the wider city ambitions around improving health outcomes, of course, but also our aspirations around economic success and around becoming carbon neutral. So I'll leave my comments there, Chair, and then hand over for more detailed introduction.
Thanks, Councillor Venner, and thanks everybody. So yeah, I'm Tony Cook, Chief Officer Health Partnerships. So responsible for the officer lead on the health and wellbeing strategy, a lot of the partnership work in the city. And I work really closely with the academic health partnership, and my role over the last few years has been to ensure that all the strategic plans in the city are properly aligned, and part of that is bringing the universities far closer to things like the city ambition, the health and wellbeing strategy, the inclusive growth strategy, and lots of the other work as well. There are a number of people around the table who've also been involved in the academic health partnership. So Tim, Phil, and Victoria are all board members. And inevitably, all the organisations in the city have had some engagement through a number of groups that we've set up over the years. More recently, the Academic Health Partnership has had a bit of a review and has had a refocus on some of the organisations that maybe haven't been around the table but are key players in the innovation world. So, for example, the West Yorkshire Combined Authority, some of the third sector organisations such as Yorkshire Cancer Research, St Gemma's, which is a teaching hospice, and do some great work up there. And also the private sector through things like the local enterprise partnership as well. So, I mean, innovation is something everyone thinks is, something that's important, but people perceive it sort of quite differently, I think. And what we've been trying to do over the last few years is just to make it a bit more practical and to come up with and design things that are really beneficial to the system. So I'm just going to mention 2 or 3 of those before I hand over to Luann, who's going to go through some of the great things that are taking place at the moment. So probably the most well-known is probably the Leeds Health and Care Academy, which was incubated in the Academic Health Partnership. And that's responsible for things like the joint training and leadership programmes across the 57,000 staff that live in the city. But more recently, one of the focuses has been around inequality. So it's taken I think this meeting, certainly some people around the table will be familiar with the work of the targeted health and employment programme in Lincoln Green that the council and LTHT have been responsible for. So that was a targeted programme on those estates, looking at entry-level roles in the NHS and particularly in the hospital, 60 people into work through that programme. And the Academy now is rolling that out on a far wider footprint across the city. So huge impact there on workforce and some desperately needed focus on the inequality part of that agenda too. People probably also picked up on some of the things that are taking place through a thing that we used to call the Leeds Centre for Personalised Medicine and Health. And particularly a thing called Pinpoint, which is ultimately an early identification, diagnostic intervention around cancer, uses AI and machine learning, has gone through a whole series of trials and is shortening pathways and having a real potential impact on a certain number of cancers, including breast and lung cancer. So again, that was an innovation that was incubated in the Academic Health Partnership. The funding came from Academic Health Partnership resources, and that organisation is increasingly going from strength to strength. It's fair to say innovation isn't always. There are things that probably Luann's going to talk through which will be really impactful. There may be some that fall by the wayside. So I'll mention one example of one that again people might be familiar with. So we had some funding from Samsung to put wearables, working closely with social care, on older vulnerable adults to prevent them either needing domiciliary or residential care or going into hospital. And we used smart watches this was in about 2017-18. It wasn't very user-led and it wasn't particularly successful. So we actually ended the trial and the project. But the learning from that about being user-focused and actually speaking to people around their care and the type of interventions they need helped us with some of the interventions that are currently under discussion at the moment, particularly DigiBeat, which Luann will talk about, which was very much user-friendly. So just a very brief intro there. Just really quickly in respect to the funding from the Academic Health Partnership. So much of the partnership work in Leeds is funded from a thing called the Fair Shares Agreement, which apportions across the system, across the NHS, across the universities and across the council, a certain share for some of the things that we know need to be done collaboratively. The cost of the council, the net cost to the council of this work is about 70,000. The total cost is just shy of £1 million, but some of the funding that's been brought into the system recently far outweighs that. So, for example, we currently have 2 posts working on employment, health, and the Anchor Institutions programme funded by the Health Foundation, and that was funding that LAP really enabled, and particularly the universities. So that's 300,000 that sits in the council's city development budget, and I'm sure other partners will probably have examples of that as well. So I'm just going to hand over to Luann, who's going to introduce herself, and she's going to talk through the current LAP innovation programme.
Good afternoon, committee. My name is Luann Lyndon Phillips, and I'm Innovation Adoption Specialist at the Leeds Academic Health Partnership. So you've already been explained how the partnership works. We have academia, the health and care providers, and economic partners, as well as third sector organisations involved. And my role is I work with partners to identify and support the development and adoption of strategically important innovations for the city. And as well as that, in order to fund some of these innovations, it's also, I bring key people together across the city to work on multi-million-pound bids from the public sector. So from funding organisations such as the National Institute for Health and Care Research, and it's increasingly evidence is being required to show multi-system, multi-partner working. So that's where certainly a new direction of the LAP has been going is in order to coordinate these key people together around these bids. So hopefully you've had a chance to have a look through the report, and you'll see that Leeds has got a really diverse and thriving research and innovation ecosystem. We've got world-leading innovation assets, research and innovation assets. We have businesses, particularly in the digital health sector, that are really starting to thrive. And in terms of going forward in the future, we need to start thinking about how skills the universities can be brought into these discussions to make sure that people in the city have got the skills for these really high value jobs. Okay, often universities can be perceived as sitting in their ivory towers and being sort of divorced from the realities of the health and care providers. But in the university's latest strategy, reducing inequalities and the social impact of their research is really explicitly at the heart of that strategy. Partnership takes its direction as well from the city ambitions set out through the councils, and we bring diverse perspectives really around common goals. That's the whole purpose of it. It's to try and maximise the resources that we have in the city, so you haven't got people going off and working in silos. And I suppose just another point just to pick out is that innovation, particularly with the people that I work with, is very tech focused usually. We've got some wonderful examples in this report of technology, but the definition of innovation that the LAP takes is much broader than that. It's around pathway redesign. It can be around taking different approaches to workforce challenges. So there's a good example through the Health Foundation work that Tony picked up on there that I can mention as well if you're interested. So I won't labour too much on the points that you hopefully sort of read within the report around the fact that we've got really good networks within the city. So you may be familiar with the academic health science networks. So they provide generalised support to innovators. So as the LAP, we stepped away from doing that sort of work, and now we are trying to identify really key innovations that crossover between that sweet spot between meeting need for the population, utilising our research and innovation assets to the maximum benefit, but also with that eye on bringing economic growth to the city. So in terms of the examples that we've included in the report, they're really good examples of how the systems work together, I suppose. So things like DigiBeat, it was very much a homegrown innovation. It was a parent of a child that had type 1 diabetes, and they could see a niche where there was an opportunity for people to self-manage their diabetes care. And through a partnership working with Leeds Teaching Hospital Trust and also bringing in the expertise of the Academic Health Science Network Propel programmes to support innovators on their journeys, they've now got it's an app that people, young people particularly, can manage their diabetes. And it's a real success story of where if you come together, you can really achieve some great outcomes. Another example that Tony picked up on was Pinpoint. This is now getting national traction in terms of its applications. When you have problems such as the waiting list backlogs, these are the types of innovations that we're really interested in looking at. How can we sort of most impact on that? This can stratify people's risk and direct them down different pathways. So it can reduce the backlog of people trying to get onto those 2-week wait pathways. It very much harnessed the research and innovation assets in the city, bringing together the University of Leeds, their expertise, with Nexus, which is an incubator for entrepreneurs and new businesses, and together with the hospital as well. And as a lab, there's certain challenges now that a lot of data-driven technologies are facing around information governance, that people are having to sort of do individual, what are called DPIAs, data protection impact assessments, each time they want to approach a new site to do work. And so this is a national level problem for any innovator. So we can bring that using our government partners through the Leeds Health and Social Care Hub onto the agenda at a national scale as well. And just you'll see the other two examples, but we're very much supporting the social care arena. There is a lot of innovation happening in this area, and it's just making sure that the needs are really clearly articulated around these problems so that we can start to match these innovations up. And as you can see in the future direction for our work and the lab, it's working more closely with the population health boards to get that data insight around what the problems really are. And then you can start to either look for those innovations or co-develop with innovators to get products that really do respond to the needs of the city.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so I'm going to move it to questions from councillors. If anyone's got any, I'll start. As I've just seen John. So I guess the first question for me is in terms of impact, I guess, and in terms of going forwards. So you've got some really clear examples of progress and what we've done, so that's really positive. I guess if you were to come back in sort of 1 or 3 years' time, what should we be seeing in terms of the impact on patients in Leeds?
So a really key area of development in the city at the moment is connecting the data sources up. You not only need to have that infrastructure so that information can flow between provider organisations, there's also the data insight that once you've collated that information, that all the data sources that you hold on patients, that you can start mining that data to start working out where are the real problems, where are you getting people that have got 3 or 4 comorbidities that are utilising the A&E services. How can they be better managed in using different pathways of support? So I would say I am, it may be ambitious, but I think within that time period that you've reflected, we're getting to that point now where the data is connected, and it's how we start using that data to provide the insights. And I think the population health boards will have access to that facility to start really picking out where are our problem areas within each of those boards, that we can then start finding the right innovations to suit that population.
Thank you very much. It sort of leads me on to my second question, which was around, I guess, are there a wider group that could be invited into the lab over time to help, I guess, with funding and innovation? So in terms of data, there's a number of companies that do health tech, I guess.
So yeah, you know, the partnership is open to anybody who wants to work with us, really. So certainly from an innovation point of view, the idea is that we do work with industry partners and bring those into the discussions. As I said before, the region has a really healthy digital sector with some really good expertise that we can start harnessing, certainly going forward. So yeah, we identify through working with our other partners. So the HSM work very closely with innovators as well. So I sit on their triage board, so I get to see everything that comes in every couple of weeks, and then it's picking what's the most relevant things to the projects that the lab is working on at that time. So you know, with these big large scale bids as well that we're looking at, they total probably around 220 million. Of the 10 active bids that we're involved in at the moment. Most of those have some sort of digital component to them, digital health component.
Thank you very much. Can I bring in Dr. John Beale?
Thank you, Chair. There are several mentions of digital in this paper, and apologies to those who've heard me say this before. But it's one of the things that does concern me, and it's absolutely important, and it's really great that Leeds is in the forefront of using digital to help in all sorts of ways. In the pre-meeting, mention was made by a colleague about patches, about doctors introducing patches. I got a text from my GP saying,
John, could you just clarify what patches is?
This is the point I'm making, Chair. I got a text saying we are introducing patches. What is patches? There was nothing in the text which told me what it was, what it did, how you use it. Now, I'm not a whiz kid, but I'm also not a total technical phobic. So I then went and looked it up. But I'm sure there are other people who got that and didn't know how to even look it up, and certainly weren't aware of how you would use it. So I do think that we need to carry people with us and make sure that people do know how they can use digital to improve all sorts of things which can be used to improve. And the other thing is those who can't use technical apparatus for all sorts of reasons. I mean, we read in the newspaper about the number of people who, because of the poverty crisis, are giving up using broadband because they cannot afford their broadband anymore. How do we carry them along if they can't use digital at home? And then there are others who, for various reasons, can't use digital. They can't afford it. They've got disabilities, learning disabilities, maybe physical disabilities. That means that they can't use digital or can't use certain aspects of digital. And we need to be very careful that what we are not doing is increasing inequalities by converting to digital only. We need to make sure that we carry everyone with us digital as far as possible, but not everyone can do it, and we need to look after those who can't use it.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree, John. One of the key things that's it's literally in the process of being signed off at the moment, is the digital strategy. And any digital strategy worth its salt obviously has to have a large focus on digital inclusion. And particularly around, you know, like you say, for either older people or people with learning disabilities who may have some digital skills but might not be able to use it for the things that we're all familiar with, like accessing GP appointments or employment type appointments as well. So yeah, I completely agree. And you know, one of the things as you build, I guess, a digital sector is that has to be a sector that also has that focus on inequality. And that's one of the things more recently we've writ large in all the lab documents, which was maybe not as strong in the first iteration of the lab, but absolutely partly as a result of the Marmot conversations and partly as a result of the city's focus on inequality, is going to be one of the priorities within the system and on the research agenda as well. I think, as Luan said, the universities are increasingly engaged with the importance of working to tackle inequality in communities, and having conversations around that with this board, I think, will be increasingly important. Oh, Luan knows about patches, by the way.
Just so this is a system that's been implemented at a West Yorkshire level, so it's not just in Leeds, and it's a robotic process automation triage platform. So it's supposed to be that you put in certain symptoms. It's supposed to do some of the functions of the sort of initial approach that you would make to a GP, and it allows you to have that conversation as well. So, but it's very new across the city. I was speaking to some GPs recently, and they're saying they need a bit more training to use it as well. So you're not the only one.
But I guess the point Dr. John is making is there's a really key communication aspect here, which is fundamental to any tech rollout. And I guess the other thing, again, I think Dr. Beale's making this point really well, is there has to be a non-digital option. So we can spend all this time on reducing digital inequality, but there will always be, in my view, a small subset who can't or won't use digital. And if we don't make an option for them, we are failing as a system. So there has to be a non-digital option. I think that's the point you're making as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And interesting, the Samsung project that I mentioned, one of the pieces of learning from that was, rather than giving older and vulnerable people how to use, a small minority did, but lots didn't. Actually, the sensor that was put on the kettle in the morning was a far more effective means of identifying whether people were up and about and were active. So yeah, and that's something that obviously went via social care. So we absolutely do need those non-digital solutions, but also solutions that are sort of part digital, but perhaps sometimes bypass people, but to call centres and things like that. So I guess it's a range of different interventions, and the bottom line behind a lot of it is face-to-face and home visits have still got to be part of the equation too.
Thank you. Tim, do you want to come in on this point?
It's slightly broader, but it's probably worth coming in. I think it's really important, all that we're saying about the inclusion agenda. We are in danger sometimes forgetting that. And at the same time, I think just in this conversation around the LAP, it's important to remember that the LAP's role is to support us in innovation and adoption of innovation. And actually, it's those of us that have the responsibility for the services themselves that need to take the responsibility of how best to introduce that innovation. The innovators innovate. It's those of us with the services. And then the second thing is, often when we hear of digital, a lot of it is about patient or public facing work. A lot of it isn't. A lot of it is enabling professionals and clinicians and managers to do their job more efficiently, effectively, to identify issues more quickly. And in that sense, doesn't come anywhere near directly patient care. I don't want us to lose that. I think some of the work that's being done in the lab is in that territory and those connections. So just didn't want us to lose that, whilst absolutely agreeing 100% around the inclusion piece.
Thank you very much, Tim. Take those points. Okay, Councillor Hartbrook.
Yeah, I was just a couple of quick points. I think we need to be careful on the language when we talk about digital, because I think we're in danger of assuming that digital is just about user interface. It's about web pages. It's not. I mean, natural speech systems that you can talk to are digital solutions. But for me, I think, and it was me that brought up the patches issues, having dealt with it firsthand, is I think there is a for me, the gap is between those people who are happy using a keyboard and expressing their symptoms and issues via a text and very basically via a keyboard and a screen, and those who want to talk. And I think most people are able to speak. Not all people are able to express themselves eloquently through through an interface. And again, picking up on the point, I think when we talk about innovation, so much of it isn't patient facing. It's machine systems, it's diagnostics, it's analytical stuff. And that was something I was going to ask a question, because I think what's clear, I think there's 220 million bid money that's been leveraged at the moment. So clearly this LAP is, from a fiscal point of view, is a wealth multiplier for the city of great repute and success, which is brilliant. I guess a couple of questions that I've got is, obviously, when you talk about health centres of excellence, the sort of the Cambridge-Oxford corridor kind of comes up. I know from my own links with Edinburgh that they've got a strong link in terms of genetic research. So I guess a couple of questions that I've got is, where is the Leeds or Yorkshire corridor recognised as being excellent? Where is our speciality? And I guess the other thing is, given that from a financial and from a health output perspective, there is a lot to go at here. Is there anything that as a city we could be doing more to strengthen our reputation and to aid, innovators, whether it be in-house innovation or as acting as a nest where we are seen as a welcome recipient? If you're going to do a piece of innovation and you're going to bring it to a populace somewhere, that we can do to make sure that Leeds is seen as, I'm going to go there because those guys get it. They'll partner with us and they'll follow through.
That is a really good question. I'm going to take the first bit, basically. So there's no question that we are increasingly known for digital and health tech. But beyond that, there's a lot of debates in the system at the moment, particularly with the university. So the council hosts a regular meeting of senior staff across Leeds University and Leeds City Council. We're looking to expand that and include the other universities as well. And one of the things that we probably want as a USP running through all the health tech and digital work is the focus on inequality. None of the other areas that are working on this have that inequality-based focus. So one of the things we've been doing more recently has been having a lot of conversations with other systems around this. So Tim has been leading some work, for example, in the NHS with colleagues in a part of New York. We've just had a conversation with colleagues in Bradford about their work on a thing called Born in Bradford and Act Early, which has been really successful in generating data that has changed a lot of policy in Bradford, everything from the school year for June and July born babies through to how they deal with and address air quality. And then likewise, there are conversations with wider members of the academic world through the Marmot programme, and also some previous conversations with organisations like York University. So there's a lot ongoing in that. I think we probably need to solidify some of that into probably a clearer city research strategy, which sounds a bit academic, but it's something that Bradford have got, that Manchester have got, and that we can bring out some of that inequality focus more clearly, I think. But in terms of maybe some of the areas we could probably innovate in and move into, I think, Luann, do you want to come in on that one?
So the population health board structure that we have in Leeds is also quite unique. So having that, and the ICS at West Yorkshire level is seen as one of the most developed ICSs out there. So we have that as a real advantage. And in terms of the offer to innovators, sometimes they get a really fragmented picture of a city when they approach it. But the one thing I can say about the Leeds ecosystem is that it is very well connected. So we're trying to get to a point where there's a single point of entry for innovators to come into the region, and then the network of connections that sit beyond that should smooth the process for innovators, and so that we can get to a point where it's very easy to do the partnership working with providers. We've also got health tech corridors that have been referred to in the paper. So connections to Israel, the Nordics, there's going to be some boot camps happening in the States. So that's not only for us to bring in the most sort of relevant innovations from on an international level that answer our needs as a city. It gives the opportunity for innovators within the city to export out as well.
Thank you very much. Do you have a follow-up? Happy?
A short one on the kind of innovation. I mean, I guess there's two bits, isn't there? There's kind of applied innovation, which is more about implementation as much as it is innovation, and then there's kind of actually, you know, fundamental research where you're just working on interesting stuff and you may not always know what it's going to deliver. It's just that it's just naturally the cutting edge. Typically, I think funding's easier to come by for the more applied because the possibility of payback seems that much closer. But is Leeds involved in both of those, and is funding available for both of those?
So there's some really exciting developments in that very early stage, working things like in silico trials, where you the idea is that you won't have to run so many patient trials in the future. You almost get a digital twin that you can do the sort of experimental medicine on. That's still early stages, but that's certainly an area of work that the universities are involved in that's really exciting. But there's different funding bodies really for those two different types of work that you've mentioned. So there's the more applied research funders that we go to, which are things like Innovate UK, the Engineering and Physical Sciences Research Council and the NIHR, and then there's other funding bodies that do the more sort of experimental science that you know, if there's potential for innovation and research to take place, then we'll be involved in looking at what's available for that.
Thank you very much. Okay, Councillor Gibson.
Thanks, Chair. I just want your honest assessment on whether or not there is enough time and resources being allocated to utilise innovative technologies in social care. You know, we hear so much, don't we, about the need for health and social care parity between the two, and sort of in the national conversation we hear so much about health tech innovation, you know, AI for diagnostic stuff and all that. We don't hear anything about social care. So I just wanted your honest assessment.
Yeah, the short answer is no, to be perfectly honest. The funding councils that Luann mentioned, their focus traditionally has not been social care. There is some change. So the NIHR, which is the National Institute of Health Research, has recently taken social care as a priority. So there is likely to be some significant funding. But there's no question there would be some real low-hanging fruit from proper investment in research in social care. So the LAP itself has broadened some of those conversations. So we've had conversations with a number of people in adult social care in Leeds, but I suspect in other areas where adult social care probably isn't as proactive, they're not as forthcoming. So I think we're in a good position should there be funding that comes for social care research, social care innovation. But it's been very much sort of drip feed at the moment. It's not as significant as maybe the things that go into primary care and acute trusts and other bits of the health system.
I just wanted to respond to that, because when we were at the Innovation Hub, some of the technology that Councillor Arif and I saw was actually social care based rather than health based. So the sensors that I mentioned that was about how you can monitor people either in a care home setting but also in their own home. And similarly, the kettle that Tony referred to, or being able to monitor your own blood pressure, being able to be reminded about hydration, were about supporting people in their home. I also just wanted to add to the point Tim made that I thought was really relevant about our instincts as councillors. I think because we engage very directly with the community, is to think about this in terms of people using tech, but actually some of the technology that we saw about supporting clinicians to do their work was incredible. We saw some modelling that enabled surgeons to simulate operations, which was just mind-blowing, and has demonstrated they're using this already. And surgeons, when they're doing kind of preparation for operations have changed dramatically sometimes what they're doing based on the technology that's enabled them to do a kind of pre-simulation. We also saw some digital tracking of blood samples, which means they never ever go astray. So I think that's a really important point, that a lot of this is about stuff we won't see as people using health services, but it's really important in enabling people to be able to do their jobs more effectively and more efficiently. Thank you.
Thank you, Luann. Do you want to come back in?
I was just saying, with the develop of the new hospitals as well, the intention is that you'll only be in there for the period of time that you need to be, and that you'll be managed in the community more going forward. So the technologies around remote monitoring, which will also impact on social care, is relevant across those domains as well. I suppose what I think would be really useful is sort of an equivalent to the innovation hub in a social care setting. That would be a great thing to have, just because it's a very easy pathway for technologies that fit acute care settings, because you've got a site almost. But with social care being more fragmented in terms of its providers, that's a little bit more tricky to deliver. But there's definitely, there've been showcasing events I've been to recently that have really shown the breadth of falls prevention technologies, and so there's a lot of activity happening in the social care space, and relevant innovations that would really help, I think. But having sort of a central place where you could actually see it in action would be really good.
I mean, it's not much more to say, and I appreciate the honest answer that I received, and I wasn't suggesting for a second that there isn't good stuff going on. The question was about parity, and I think you've answered that question, so thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, Councillor Ritchie.
Thanks, Chair. Just my question's around, there's a reference to 21st century connectivity and infrastructure. Are we confident that we have got that infrastructure in place for this progressive use of technology that's been developed? Because we've all been on, I know it's not the same thing, but we've all been on Zoom calls where somebody has to turn the camera off or we lose connectivity. So I just wondered how far we were on that road to getting 21st connectivity and infrastructure. Secondly, artificial intelligence. I can imagine that frightening a minority, but a vociferous minority of the population. We've already had conspiracy theories from the vaccine to 5G, bizarrely 20-minute neighbourhoods. So I imagine artificial intelligence will be the next conspiracy theory, and people will have genuine concerns about that. I'm not belittling people's views, but just wondered how we might manage that. Then a final one. What on earth is a hackathon, which is on page 84?
Hackathon one first. That's the easy one. So we've got the integrated digital service that's operating in Leeds City Council that are doing some fantastic work at the moment. And the hackathons are, you bring all the people that are relevant around a particular problem. It's specific to the digital space in their context, and you just thrash out different ideas, and it's a really open platform. Anybody can come, anybody that has an interest in those in that particular area. They put out invitations to quite a wide group of people so that it can really reach within the networks, and they come and they discuss potential solutions to ideas. So it's supposed to be very inclusive in involving as many relevant people as possible. So that's the hackathon part of it, and they run about, I think it's about 2 to 3 per year around different themes. It's been some exciting work coming out of that.
I'll have a stab at the AI one. I mean, obviously, it's something that's hugely in the news at the moment, and inevitably will be sort of increasingly as we use it for more and more technologies and more systems. But one thing that's worth pointing out with anything that the universities do, there has to be an ethical approval route for any clinical trial, and that involves patient consents, just like we have in local government as well. And it's important to, I think, to make that point. But you're probably right about the conspiracy theorists, but there are already real signs that AI-based tools. So the Pinpoint one that I mentioned uses AI. The search for antibiotics. So, you know, if you look at, say, something like gonorrhea, sexual health, in sexual health world, a lot of the frontline antibiotics are actually no longer effective. So there's a use of AI to search for ones that may be also useful. And I think we'll increasingly see that type of approach across conditions as well. And then just on the sort of connectivity and infrastructure, you'd have to ask a digital specialist a little bit more than me for that one. But I guess, again, all these technologies. So in the council, we had Skype initially, didn't we, a number of years ago? And whilst Teams and Zoom might fail every now and again, Skype sort of failed all the time, didn't it? So as every year passes, we refine our understanding of how to use some of these technologies. The key, and which is why it's been really important, I think, to come here, is to keep asking those questions about the inequality of access to the technologies, and indeed making sure that whatever we use in all these new and whizzy things that absolutely have ethics approval and are, where possible, as user-led as they can be.
Just to come back, I guess what I was asking is, are the academics and other partners, they're not getting frustrated because they would be able to do something with actually, I don't know if it's, I'll say bandwidth, it's probably not that, but you know what I mean? That's what I was asking, really. Any frustrations come to light because the rollout is perhaps too slow?
There's the Leeds Office for Data Analytics that are kind of taking this in hand, and through the recent publication of the digital strategy, it really outlines what the processes are that they're going to go through to achieve this, and it's well underway, I can tell you that. So but as you say, I think you need somebody from them here to represent what they're doing in terms of that work.
Thank you very much. Okay, Councillor Farley.
Thank you, Chair. So yeah, I've got 3 questions picking up on a few of the themes that have been raised throughout this. I think Tim made a very good point with regards to quite a lot of this technology focusing on behind the scenes, as you will. Kind of, yeah, how can we improve the processes for staff? How can we look at you know, the systems that we're using? So I suppose my first question is, kind of, how are staff on the front line being engaged on this greater use of technology, on this great use of digital? Clearly there are improvements that can be made, and you know, some of them may be more apparent than others. This then leads me on to my second question around kind of what does tech and digital integration look like? And that's both within the context as we now we have the ICSs, and quite a lot of government and political policy making is looking towards greater integration between health and social care. How does this digital technology kind of integrate with that program? And that's especially within the context of really fragmented systems that we've got, especially across healthcare, you know, where you might find, just a, perhaps a bit of a silly example, but you might find like Windows XP running in some parts of the NHS. And then finally, and again, this is sort of like really future facing, what difference do we anticipate that this is going to make to the future of the NHS and social care, you know, 5, 10, 25, 50 years down the line? I mean, I'm not anticipating sort of like flying ambulances or anything like that, but you know, what will be how will we recognize that this program is doing what it's supposed to be doing? Thank you.
Very good question. Lots of points in there, and I think ultimately, I guess you're asking about the case for integration and where it may or may not lead. And you know, it is at the moment, I think, the only game in town, because whenever you speak to any people on the ground, whether it's in primary care, whether it's in the hospital, whether it's your friends and family, they don't want to be assessed over and over again. They don't want digital systems, or indeed to see a whole different number of clinicians and people. They want the care as responsive as possible, as early as possible, and as close to home as possible. And whilst, you know, delivering that is absolutely a major challenge, there's no question, particularly at the moment with some of the funding challenges that we've got in the system and the sheer level of demand that's out there, which was there, to be honest, before the pandemic and has since been exacerbated. There's no question that pulling together, you know, all our digital processes, our analytics, but actually how we manage some of the teams on the ground as well. So, you know, there's been a lot of integration. We've got Caroline, we've got obviously we've got the hospital team with Phil here, and a number of joint innovations and projects already that are beginning to deliver. We'll increasingly see more of those, and ultimately the plan to keep people out of hospital and keep care closer to home. It has to be the thing that we push our energy and our focus on. And the population health boards that we referred to earlier are one example of that, where they take a defined cohort and try and do their best for those people by looking at the resources available, looking at what the data is telling us, and designing interventions on the back of this. I think we're a long way to go before we get it all right, there's no question, but we're on a road to, I think, a better future across the health and care system, because we're increasingly doing things collectively in Leeds, and we are ahead of other areas in terms of our integration, getting everyone around the table. We've had healthcare and LCH and LYPFT and the hospital together for ages. Bringing the universities really into the heart of the system is really going to help us. It already is doing, but it will do increasingly over future years.
Just to add to that as well, in terms of there's the Leeds Health and Care Academy who deal with the workforce issues across the city, and the plan is to do sort of innovation training courses with them, with the staffs, because over the last few years with the pandemic, the staff are exhausted, and you know, the idea of then having to take on new systems and new processes, it is a difficult change in cultural mindset. So by running these sorts of courses, that's going to be one of the ways of just trying to change that mindset, in that innovation is probably the only way to deal with some of these challenges that the health and care system are facing at the moment.
Thank you. I'm going to bring in Tim and then Caroline, and then you can have a quick follow-up.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to respond to the question around integration, really. And it is important in this innovation space to remember the degrees of integration we have already got and the direction we want to travel. You know, we just mentioned the Leeds Workforce Academy, and potentially there's innovation around workforce that can play through, and that's a, you know, NHS, local authority, third sector, real collaboration. When we talk about the integrated digital service, it is NHS and local authority. That is seen as really quite innovative, and we see people from all over the country trying to coming along to see how on earth we've done what we've done already. And within that is the Leeds Office of Data Analytics, which brings together health data, social care data, potentially things like housing and education, and that becomes hugely incredibly useful for research. It's quite I think it's quite profound in reality, what we might be able to do in that respect. So I don't want us to see that integration is entirely something new. It is more how we bring that innovation into it alongside that integration that we're already doing, and help it to be taken forward. So I didn't want to say much more than that, but it's just let's not see innovation as the answer for integration. Integration will benefit innovation, and innovation will benefit integration. They're really sort of two twin things.
Thank you. Some of what I was going to say has already been covered, but just in addition to that, you know, we have to recognise that social care has been a bit late coming to the party on this, but every bit of work that we're doing currently within adult social care, where we're looking at transformation and service development, we're doing with an eye to how technology and innovation can be incorporated. We have huge numbers of providers of services across Leeds, little social care providers, large scale social care providers, national and local, and they are also looking at how they can incorporate technology in the services that they provide, and where that might also add value. So all of our transformation programs, they all have a view to, and where could we as local authority, as NHS, but also as our provider market, benefit from innovation and available technology. So it's a theme that runs through everything that we do.
Okay, thank you for all of those points. I mean, yeah, I don't disagree. Kind of, innovation and integration do need to go hand in hand. I suppose my question was more around the fact that we have got, in many cases, quite a fragmented system and different ways of working already taking place. And as we innovate, how's that how's that going alongside the integration process? Just want to pick up on one of the points that was made around staff. Do we have any concerns around what I'll describe as around change fatigue, especially in the case of the NHS, because over the past 13 years, there's been a number of changes, not all of them particularly brilliant or well thought out. But this has had an impact on staff at every level. So I suppose my question is, kind of how are we considering, like you said, the staff are a bit burned out, a bit fragged after COVID-19, but on top of all of the other changes and the workforce issues. And I suppose really, is there a current engagement plan? And does this incorporate, end user testing for the systems that have been looked at? Thank you.
Yes, I suppose you've got to demonstrate the benefit to them of implementing the innovations. So through doing the pilots and the validation studies using innovations, they're not just automatically putting to use. You get that opportunity to show them how this could benefit their practice, and if you can, reduce their workload. But it will require a change of mindset towards certain of these technologies, because it is a totally different way of doing things, and change is always difficult. But yeah, it's demonstrating what that benefit can be, I think.
Good. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. I think that was a really interesting discussion. And to paraphrase Tim here, let the innovators innovate. But going back to the start, we also, as a wider, I guess, Tim in particular, the commissioning angle, needs to make sure we keep inclusivity in mind and making sure everyone's involved, and we keep the health inequalities as small and shrinking as possible. So thank you, everyone, for that debate. So we're going to move on to agenda item 12 in just a minute, but I think so there's a bit of a move around here, so I'm just going to suggest we have a 5-minute recess as we move. I'm going to give our NHS colleagues permission to leave, because it's predominantly an internal paper next. So we'll just shut down for 5 minutes and then come back with new people at table. But those who are going, thanks for your time so far, and see you next time. Okay. I'm just going to give everyone a 1.5 minute warning until we're going to start again. Okay, thank you, everyone. Welcome back to the meeting. We're back on stream. So the next item on the agenda is item 12, which is the usual performance item.
Sorry, Chair, can we have one meeting, please?
Thank you, Councillor Farley. You clearly have a more assertive voice than me when you want to. Try and softly approach. But I'll make notes on more forceful tones of voice. Okay, so this is item 12. We're back in the room. We've got a few new people at the table, so I'm going to just start with asking those who are new to the table to introduce themselves. So please go ahead.
Hi, I'm Rob Wood. I'm Intelligence and Policy Manager for Adult Social Care.
Good afternoon, Shola McFarlane, Deputy Director, Adults and Health.
Hi, Tim Fielding, Deputy Director of Public Health.
Super, thank you. So this is the usual performance update. What I was thinking would be useful just to go through them in 3 sections, if that's okay. So we've got, we'll start with Public Health, which is page 103, and then we'll move to Adult Social Care, which is page 121, and then we'll move to Active Lifestyles, which is page 127, if that's okay. So starting at the start, I don't know if you want to introduce this, Councillor Arif, and then if Victoria wants to say anything as well. Thank you.
Yes, Chair, thank you very much. So this report summarises how well we are doing as a city to improve people's health. It shows our progress across a range of health outcome measures and includes an overview of the performance of key public health services, Chair. This time around, the paper does not include updated commentary on health inequalities, and this is because publication of Office for National Statistics data has been delayed until autumn. In this report, though, we can see that life expectancy for both males and female remains stable and that our public health services continue to perform well, particularly the number of public people accessing the NHS health checks. Indicators in this report will be kept under review alongside the ongoing work towards Leeds becoming a marmot city. This will ensure that we continue to review our local progress towards improving the health of the poorest and fastest. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to add a couple of introductory points, mindful of new colleagues to the board. Just in terms of what this report tries to do, because it does kind of cover a pretty broad scope. So we want to do everything we can to make it as accessible and clear as possible. So for those people who received this report 6 months ago on the board, we have actually taken the report away and tried to do quite a lot of work to make it kind of clearer and more succinct in its content. So I hope for those of you who saw it before and see it now, you should hopefully you've noticed that. You might have also noticed that last time we had lots of different data sets in it, so we've really tried to bring it down this time. So we bring this report 6 monthly. And what we try to do is use it as an opportunity to really look at a handful of some really key indicators, a small number of key indicators that show us some of the kind of the big picture kind of measures of how we're doing in terms of health across the city. So as and when the data comes available, we look at death rates, we look at the gap around life expectancy, we look at, you know, the things you can see in here, which are the sort of key long-term public health measures. What we also do is put in some service delivery measures and some much shorter term operational measures. So it's not all long term kind of death rates and bigger picture stuff, but there's some practical short term measures in there as well. It is a handful of measures that intends to show the broad picture of the health of the population. Underneath each of those measures are hundreds, if not thousands, of measures that we can drill down for any particular area, should you wish. So, you know, we're more than happy to have conversations that get into more detail, you know, after the board. The headline, what we also try and do is make the commentary as clear as possible. So on page 98, up until page 99, what we've tried to do, and we've tried to improve it this time, is really summarise in section 5 what the overall position is. And this includes data that's new for this report, but kind of a reminder as well of where we are as a city. So we've got those kind of big picture sort of headlines of some of the things that we would be interested in. And then section 6 really tries to pull out from the data that we've received this time, the new data, what are the things that show an improved picture in broad terms. So with those bullet points, summarise that. And then section 7 really looks at where the challenges are from the data that we've got this time. And then in appendix 1A, what we've done is for every single indicator, there is a really short summary, hopefully in sort of plain English, about whether this is going in the right direction, the wrong direction, so that gives a sort of clear overview of performance across public health for the board. So I shall leave it there without going into any detail about the content, but hopefully that's helpful, Chair.
Thank you very much, Victoria. And just worth noting, because of the earlier question about vaping, there's obviously smoking's in here, but that doesn't include vaping. When we did Chair's briefs, just set out why that was the case. Could you just explain that to the board as well, please, Victoria? That's where I'll just give you a moment and waffle. Okay, can you turn your mic back on? Thank you.
Sorry. So how we bring this together is we look at sort of the main areas of public health and think, you know, what might be the 1 or 2 indicators that would be helpful to get a sense of whether it's going the right direction or not. So historically, these are things that as a public health team, we've thought would be the best kind of bundle of indicators that give a decent picture of the health of the city. There's, you know, we can't report on everything, otherwise the report would be 1,000 pages long. So as we get often kind of new and emerging public health challenges, and vaping could be an example of that, we would always kind of review, have we got the content right? Are there things missing? So I think the vaping one is a really good example, and it's really helpful that you've raised that, so we can go back and look at, you know, have we got these right? And again, would welcome any comments from the board about things that may not be in here that we might want to look at. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Victoria. Are there questions from councillors, please? One thing I just wanted to highlight was on page 113, and year 6 prevalence of obesity increasing, and with the board's permission, I'd like to refer that to the Children's and Family Scrutiny Board. Unless there's objections, I'm going to crack on and do that. No, okay, good. I can't see any other questions. So, Councillor Hartbrook.
I think this is really good report, and there's so much data in here, and it's very accessible in terms of to see what's going on. I think what would be interesting would, because I'm very interested in the difference between sort of causation and correlation. So just because something's, something you can see everything, is that what's driving, what's driving that? And I don't know whether as part of this, for some of the key areas, I mean, when I'm just looking at here, I mentioned about the suicide rates earlier on, but that there was an interesting thing on best starts, number of under twos taken into care, which is down appreciably over the last decade, which is on page 118. And again, is that because that could be because of capacity rather than because of other interventions. So I think for things like this, where there is a significant deviation, either upwards or downwards, just one or two words or a summary of some of the key trends as to what's driving some of the changes would be appreciated. Or I guess as members, we can ask that in this scrutiny, which is what we're here for.
Yeah, no, thank you for the point. I completely agree. For example, on page 98, when we talk about the overall position in the reduction of deaths from stroke, heart disease, cancers and respiratory, that may be very positive news in itself, but it may be an impact of deaths from COVID-19 in the pandemic, and there is the question there about the excess winter death rate is doing some very strange things at the moment, and we need to understand that properly. So you're absolutely right to raise it. I think some of these things we have highlighted as this looks interesting. We need to keep an eye on it. We might not know the answer yet, but really happy to get into those conversations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, Councillor Ritchie.
Yeah, thank you. Just on the obesity theme, I sit on two LCPs that cover sort of Bramley, Wortley, Middleton and Leeds West LCP, and they've got an initiative around obesity, three-pronged approach: grow, cook and move, to capture sort of a holistic journey, I suppose. One of the problems with such initiatives, as you'll all be aware of, but it's that short-term funding. They're having to bid for money, they're successful, and then obviously then we need to evaluate it, and it's that process, that evaluation, and then putting it out there across the city. Really, that's one of the challenges. It's not really a question because I'm sure you're aware of it, but I think it's worth highlighting. I suppose around a question based on it would be, are the LCPs, will there be, is the idea to share information, what works? If things don't work, stop them and move on to something else.
So yeah, thank you for the comments, Councillor Ritchie. I mean, there's an overall challenge around levels of funding generally for the scale of work we need to do around some of our major public health challenges, which obviously include people who are living with obesity and how we kind of support healthy way and support people. So there's a challenge generally around funding for prevention and inequalities, which we're all part of. I think that one of the things you might remember that before the pandemic, Leeds was in the headlines for very positive reasons, because we've managed to narrow the gap around children's obesity, and particularly reduce rates in more deprived areas of the city. We have the story, the narrative around that was partly because we didn't do lots of short-term projects. We kind of held our nerve on investment in kind of the children's kind of system across the city, and all of that, those preventative kind of services, and as well as some more specific public health programs like the Henry programme. So I think we can tell a really good story around why it matters to hold your nerve around funding for the longer term, and certainly in terms of public health funding across the city. In terms of the children's obesity work, that we don't work on a short-term funding basis, because we know that that's not the answer. but we're aware of kind of lots of other pots of money that are more short term. So I do take your point. I think that we are in a position of needing to make the case for this going forward as finances get even tighter across the public sector. Just in terms of where we are now in terms of children's obesity, we did see, you'll see from the report, we did see this unprecedented jump in reception age children, particularly in deprived communities just after COVID. What's more positive now is that that's sort of settled down to more or less where it was, but obviously is still much too high and moving in the wrong direction. So but we know that as a city we have more children living in areas of poverty than most places, but our rate of childhood obesity is pretty much national average. So we are doing better than our demographics suggests we should be in these areas. So we just have to keep kind of doing what we know works best and making the case in this kind of challenging financial world at the moment. So, but yeah, thank you for your comments.
Do you want to come back, Councillor Mitchie?
Yeah, so just to come back, so some of these have been, as you say, been funded by the NHS that they're bidding for. I'm not convinced, well, I have got some data that the uptake, say in Henry, is not the same as when we ran them from our children's centres. So I don't know how we can, and they're doing all the best that they can do. You know, I've looked at the comms and what have you. I don't know whether it's the times, the venues, the fact that they're working across ward boundaries sometimes. It's led by the patient address, or the GP surgery, isn't it? Rather than, you know, whereas a lot of our stuff is ward based, isn't it? So it's, I guess, how can we learn from the success of our Henrys, was one example, and make sure that the LCP health paid for provision is as successful, because there's definitely a lower uptake on these latest courses. Hope that made sense.
Thank you. Yeah, we can take that. I can take that away and have those conversations with colleagues. Thank you.
Yeah, and Chair, if I could also just add, I was just going to come on in also in that broader point, and not to touch on the funding, which Victoria's obviously covered, but the broader point about, you asked about whether in your original question we join up and have those conversations across the board. And I suppose just to give you some reassurance that although the two does tend to be sort of more specialist teams work on things like the obesity or the children's work, actually we do have a localities and primary care team who do work with the LCPs really closely and do make sure that we work in a very integrated way. So there is a good join up across between the public health, but also the wider colleagues between that. But as Victoria said, I can take that back, but just to assure you that that is joined up reasonably well.
Super. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so moving on to the next section, which is page 121 to 126. Caroline, I don't know if you want to say any introductory comments. Councillor Arif first, and then Caroline. Thank you.
Back to me, Chair. So the report presents an update on adult social care activity levels and the latest position on measures included in the Adult Social Care Outcomes Framework (ASCOF), as well as additional metrics where relevant to the Best City Ambition, Better Life Strategy or Care Quality Commission CQC assurance framework. So the framework within which adult social care data is collected and reported nationally is in a period of transition. This means that there are going to be some changes to how the data is collected and changes to the way data is reported and used. There will be a revised ASCOF framework from 23-24, including amended suite of performance measures. In addition, this data will be used as a key part of the evidence-based use to support the new Care Quality Commission assurance regime. During 2022-2023, adult social care in Leeds providing long-term support to over 10,500 people. This figure is an increase compared to 2021 and 2022, but remains below pre-pandemic levels. Adult social care continues to experience significant pressure on its service from increased demand compared to pre-pandemic levels across all areas. This is compounded by the challenges in relation to workforce capacity. Now, despite these challenges, the overall picture in relation to key national performance measures is positive, with 11 out of 16 improving compared to 2021 and 2022, including increasing levels of service users receiving self-directed support and more carers being supported in the city. However, challenges remain and around the ability of the service to carry out annual reviews, and we continue to see a rise in the number of safeguarding concerns. That's all, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And just to add that we really welcome the changes that are being made around the reporting requirements. And we've known for far too long that they really don't capture everything that we do for our citizens. For example, we don't measure how we are successfully preventing people needing paid for care and support services. So the whole prevention, early intervention, and I'd say that in Leeds, we do a really good job. We've got really good relationships and commissioning of third sector partners to deliver services that keep people safe and well at home. They don't get captured at all. So what we are reporting nationally is probably a limited set of people, the 10,000 or so people that Councillor Arif has just referred to, who are receiving short-term and long-term care that meets Care Act eligibility. Doesn't count the huge amount that we also do. So it's really welcome that we're going to get a change in the reporting requirements and the measures. And the other thing is that also it's going to be live data. So we're not going to be working to the data that is out of date as soon as it's published. It will be data accessed, which will give us a little bit better of a sense of informing what's working in our investment strategies, what's not working, where we need to do more. And the only other thing I would add, again, on what Councillor Arif has already said, we know that we are probably not doing as well as we can, partly due to our workforce capacity and workforce challenges, and that goes across the a country, really, a lot of areas struggling with social work capacity, resulting in people having to wait for an assessment and then wait also for services. Some of that is now improving because of different measures that we're putting in place and different work that we're doing. So I'm pleased to say that we're hoping that we're going to be on an upward sort of projectile going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just a question from me around, so on page 125, really helpful table. The comparator, I think it says comparator nationally agreed group of LAs for comparing outcomes. I'm just wondering, who are those nationally agreed comparators?
Yeah, so the comparator group are compiled by CIPFA, the Chartered Institute of Financial, I can't remember the exact acronym, but Financial Assurance, and that is a group of 15 local authorities that are most similar to us in terms of demographic makeup. Each individual authority has its own individual group of 15. Ours includes people like Bristol, Bradford, Sheffield, Liverpool, and they are updated each year as to who that group is.
Thank you very much. Any other questions from councillors? Oh, John?
Thank you, Chair. Mine's on 126, number of telecare installations, which I'm assuming are a good thing. If you look at the figures, it was just over 4,000 in 1920, and then it fell back, which I assume was because of COVID, went up to 4,200 plus a bit, and then fell back a bit in 2022-23. And I just wondered why it was falling back down again.
Ever so sorry, John. I missed which indicator you were talking about. I am looking at it on the table. Which particular one?
Oh. Can I bring you in, Shona, on that one, your area of service? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Beale. This measure does change year by year, but we're definitely hoping that this year we'll see an increase. We've put in place a marketing strategy and we've changed the model of service delivery, so there's more choice available to people to enable them to pick the level of telecare that they need, from very basic, if I fall, I've got the pendant that was mentioned earlier, through to if I fall and I don't have anyone available, then somebody will come. So we've got a measured range of services that are available, and we're marketing them very broadly to the people of Leeds, including people who previously might not have come to us because they're self-payers. So we've broadened the range, and I'm hoping that we will see this year that number increasing. Early signs are in the first 2 months that we did see an increase in take-up. So I think that'll be a different picture next year.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Could you just turn your microphone back off? Thank you, Dr. Beale. Okay, Councillor Gibson.
Quick one about safeguarding activity increase. So there's an increase in safeguarding activities in the report.
Thank you, Councillor Gibson. We have noticed a sustained trend in referrals from our partners. There has been, partly as a result of an awareness raising campaign that the Safeguarding Adults Board has undertaken, which has reached a different range of communities than we might have done previously. We're also seeing a significant number of referrals coming from our partners, West Yorkshire Police and Yorkshire Ambulance Service. We work with them on a weekly basis to support them to understand the thresholds for safeguarding. Quite often what they will refer is a situation that requires a response. So that might need a social worker, it might need somebody to be signposted some information, but it's not what you would call safeguarding because there's no harm involved. So we spend quite a lot of time triaging, screening those referrals, and we end up then only undertaking safeguarding activity with the ones that meet the Section 42 requirements, somebody who has or appears to have a need for care and support and who has been harmed or is at risk of harm. Those are the ones that we look at. However, the difference in numbers this year indicates that the referrals have gone up, but the number of inquiries has stayed the same. So we're looking at the decision making that we're employing when we're saying this isn't safeguarding. So we're checking a number of not safeguarding activities to make sure that our decision making has been accurate there. We've done it quite frequently, these audits into where we've made a decision that something isn't safeguarding, just to check that we're getting our decision making right on that. So we're doing that at the moment. I think fundamentally the increase in referrals though is partners who perhaps refer things that aren't quite safeguarding. We take a no wrong door approach. If they do that, we will pick a safeguard. We will pick up either a signposting or a social care assessment when that referral comes through to us. Okay.
And if it's okay, I'll come in as well. And we do look at the data regularly. We drill down in terms of where are the referrals coming from, but which communities, which communities of interest, which service user groups. And last year, when we did this, we saw that we were not getting many referrals around safeguarding from our culturally diverse communities in Leeds relative to the population makeup. So we commissioned VAL, Voluntary Action Leeds, to do a little bit of work for us, to talk to our different community groups from different ethnic diverse backgrounds. And we wanted to understand, was it some, was our communication not very good? Was our accessibility not very good? How could we ensure that all of our citizens understand, and also the community organisations that work with our citizens understand what would make a relevant and appropriate safeguarding inquiry? So that might also have impacted on increased numbers of referrals. And to some extent, we're not worried about that
the point that Shona makes, just to reinforce that what we want to get to is that that we make the decisions appropriately around, well, yes, this is absolutely a safeguarding good, there's good awareness about it, let's take it forward. Or are we learning that referrals are coming but they are inappropriate, in which case what do we need to do to address understanding and accessibility towards our safeguarding processes?
Commend you for that, for doing that work. You know, with stretched budgets and things, it would be easy not to focus on actually essentially trying to make sure that there are safeguarding referrals. And thank you, Shona, for what you said as well about making sure that you're doing the necessary checks to make sure that, you know, people that just because there aren't as many sections 42 inquiries, that those that don't reach that threshold actually are appropriately not reaching that threshold. So well done. I think that's great work. Well done.
Super. Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to move on to next section, which is active lifestyles, and bring Councillor Arif in again.
It's me again, Chair. So finally, on active Leeds, our inactivity rate has significantly fallen since the rise during the pandemic. There are more people active now than the first survey back in 2015-16, which are testament to the work and investment that has gone into physical activity opportunities across the city. Inactivity levels are lower than the national, which is 25.8%, and regional 27.2%, and core cities at 25% averages. So that's really good news. Numbers are still down compared to the pre-pandemic, and it has also been most acute across disadvantaged groups and across areas of high deprivation that are not recovering as quickly. We are tackling this through the development of the physical activity ambition for Leeds, which is being led by Active Leeds and Public Health together with partners across the city. The Get Set Leeds local programme has also received a further 2 years of funding from Sport England to enable Active Leeds to continue this excellent work in our priority localities, where co-production and asset and place-based approaches are delivering some fantastic work on the ground. That's all, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Do you want to comment?
Yes, just in terms of the data itself, just for the new members of the board, this comes from Sport England, which is on an annual basis. It used to be reported every 6 months, but now it is an annual kind of record of basically they do a survey nationally, and in Leeds they look at 2,000 people they kind of telephone or talk to access their kind of activity levels. So they put them into 3 categories. Inactive is people doing less than 30 minutes of exercise a week. The second category is fairly active, which is between 30 and 149 minutes. And then in terms of active, they class as doing the recommended amount of 150 minutes per week of activity. So that's how they categorize those different areas. And then they kind of compare those nationally across the board. Sport England, very similar to some of the social kind of information, are currently reviewing the kind of survey and the data and how they collect that data. So we are feeding into that moving forward. But they are kind of looking at assessing whether, for example, the survey amount and the number of people they do survey needs to increase or decrease in certain areas where they've got high deprivations, or particularly where they are working with key organisations like ourselves in areas where they need to focus a bit more attention on that front. So I'll keep everyone abreast of that kind of development, but we are engaged in that front. In terms of activity levels, there's lots of positives to be taken away from what we are doing and how we are delivering. From a leisure centre perspective, we've got more people learning to swim, we've got more schools engaged in swimming lessons, we've got more people engaged in health and fitness memberships and the piece as well. So from a performance side of things, it is all working. Like Councillor Rees just mentioned around the Get Set Leeds local kind of work, that and funding element, that is now going to 6 years of funding. So long-term kind of funding where we can really test some of those initiatives and likes is kind of really good from our point of view, that we can really make sure that we are impacting, because it does take a long period of time, especially when you're working in these locality areas where you're working with communities to understand and develop themselves to deliver activities as well. So from that point of view, that funding is much welcomed and hopefully can make some bigger impacts as we go forward. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Steve. Open up to questions, but I'll start as I can't see anyone else. So I guess firstly, in terms of reducing inactivity levels, do we have any sort of targets for that sort of interim? So like in a year's time, we're aiming for whatever. The next question, the other question I have is just in terms of fully agree with what you're saying, lots of good stuff happening in our leisure centres. I guess I would say there are still long waiting lists for things like swimming and diving at our big leisure centres, and whether that's we're fully utilising them to the maximum. Thank you. Also, just a comment. I think the Get Set local stuff is really good, and where we've empowered local people to run groups, that's been really, really positive.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, in terms of the Get Set Leeds stuff, that, you know, there's loads of examples that we kind of share, and that social proofing side of things is really key to kind of make sure that communities themselves can know that they are able and can kind of take part in activities about getting them moving more. In terms of waiting lists, yes, we do have waiting lists across the board in terms of our swimming lessons side of things. More so, we have increased those pre-pandemic, so we've got now 1,500 more children learning to swim than what we had pre-pandemic. So that has recovered massively, but we do have more and more. Obviously, the backlog of that during COVID, where people weren't able to get into the pool and likes, we're just trying to catch up on that front at this particular time. There are some workforce kind of side of things which kind of prohibits that a little bit, because we just don't have the volume of swimming teachers coming through to enable us to grow capacities there. But we have definitely made some big improvements over that period of time. So we are now training up a lot more swim teachers across the board. Every kind of month, we're kind of getting those through. We're also getting a more diverse kind of workforce coming through as well from our side of things. So our targeted work in terms of communities and the work that we're kind of doing on that front is to broaden that perspective of our workforce as well. So from that side of things, there are some challenges still on it, but we are kind of starting to make some headway in terms of some of the waiting lists, and that will continue to grow as we develop. We also do healthy holiday activities during the summer and half terms and likes as well, where we provide free swimming lessons to children through kind of on free school meals and likes. That is really targeted work that we kind of provide. We also provide them equipment to be able to come to the pools as well, because a lot of the problems we tend to exist where we're working with communities at this point in time is they don't actually have the equipment to take part in sport or activities. So we are working with a number of different providers on that front to enable them to donate equipment, and then we can pass that on. But also through this kind of funding for the healthy holiday stuff, we do give out swimming costumes, goggles, and then some free passes after that as well. So we are trying to catch up. School swimming wise, again, we've got more schools swimming than we've had before. So we've got about 90% of the schools actually use our kind of leisure centres as well. We are pretty much at capacity that way because there's only a number of pools that we can provide during the day. So the other 10% tend to be at their own kind of private pools that schools might have, or other venues as well. So the vast majority of schools are actually using that side of things now as well. And forgive me, there's another comment as well.
Yeah, just I asked about interim targets.
Yes, in terms of the interim targets, what we've always had is about a roughly 1% reduction every year in terms of inactivity rates. We are currently working to kind of review that as we go forward. And obviously during COVID, we kind of reduced that quite dramatically during that period of time. But as we kind of develop that forward, then we do kind of work on that 1% reduction each time. We are working with, in terms of the health and wellbeing strategy as well, to kind of put in those targets associated not only inactivity but activity as well, to show that although our inactivity rates are going down as well, that our inactivity rates are actually increasing as well. So people are doing more and more kind of activity than ever before as well. So we're just trying to show the two different areas there as well.
Super, thank you very much. I can't see anyone else indicating. So we'll move on. Thank you very much for that. I think that's really helpful report. I enjoyed reading it. Okay, so moving on to item 13, which is the work schedule. I don't think there's anything particularly controversial in here. Obviously, we talked about the works programme earlier. Clearly, again, myself and Angela needs to go away and look at all the suggestions that made and come up with a schedule. So unless there's any, Councillor Farley, you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to see this year that we've got winter planning and resilience in October. Might I make a suggestion that we revisit winter planning maybe for the February or the March meeting, just on the basis that we can quite happily discuss the plan. But the question then is, does the plan actually work? And what are the outcomes of it?
Certainly take that way. I think certainly the October discussion has to include learning outcomes from last year for a start. But yeah, happy to take that away and think about it. Anything else? No. Okay, super. So thank you everyone very much for coming. I've enjoyed myself, even if no one else has. So thank you, and I'll see you next time.